Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Don Labonte. This is the first hour of a 25 to 30 hour lesson plan that I have for students who are beginning to learn English conversation skills. Every journey through the process of learning a language has a beginning, and I always start here. I would suggest that because in every class we'll have a template, a little snapshot like you see here that we can give to the student, that they get a 3-ring binder, and as we go through the process they can keep this in a booklet which you can easily refer back and forth to. All of the patterns can be found at my website, highlighted here. There's about 153 patterns that we go through, and in the beginning we want to make sure that they have good question and sentence making skills at the very first hour, and this is the hour number 1. I always begin with how to make a question. The Q here represents an abbreviation for question. We'll use that throughout the process, and there's either a positive or a negative question. The other variations are with the present, past, and the future. I stick with a very simple verb because the verbs are not important. What's important is that they are able to make a question correctly. So I just keep with the verb study. And I first go through the template with them. I begin with the present, positive, and I go down and then I begin the negative. I'll give them a verb study, a regular verb study, and I ask them to just say, do I study, do you study, does he study? Do we study, do you study, do they study? Then we go down to the past tense, followed by the future tense. Then I begin to, you'll have to be like a master weaver here when you can ask them to repeat after you to see if they're if they can hear you correctly and able to mimic you. So you can use, for example, you can say to have them repeat, you can say, do you study? They have to say, do you study? Did they study? Will they study? Do they read? Will you read? See if they are able to mimic you, and if they're able to hear well and respond with the same pattern. Then I do the same thing with the negative forms of all these, the question forms. As you well know, the only exceptions are found in the present tense with the third person singular. The goal here is to familiarize the student with the ways to making questions. In the teacher's guide, I also have a snapshot or a template. It's entitled Pattern Practice, and it's the same format here without the written form. So you can basically give them a verb and have them go through the do I, do you, does he, do we, do you, do they, and depending on the verb tense and whether it's positive or negative. So at first you can give them the full view of what it's like, then you can show them a blank area in each of these quadrants and try to drill them to that to make sure their question making skills are up to par. I then move on to how the sentence is made with a verb. I do have this in the teacher's guide printout, which has this all filled in. Unfortunately, I couldn't fit it on this particular program that I'm using, but you can print it off there, or you can look at the video ESL Conversation Patterns Verb How to Make a Sentence, and you'll see the format. Once again, the abbreviations here for S is sentence. You have the positive and the negative. And I go through the same diagram with I, you, he, etc. I, you, he, we, you, they, in the present, the past, the future. In the past, in the beginning, I only use regular verbs. In about 3 hours, we're going to study the irregular verbs, so I don't want to confuse them right at the beginning with irregular verbs. So we just keep it very simple here at the beginning. We also then do the negative in the present, past, and the future. So we've shown the student both the question-making skill and the sentence-making skill. Questions are more difficult to make than sentences. That's why I start with the question. If they can do a question, usually the sentence is much easier to make. So basically during the class what I'm doing is it's basically a drill to find out if I use do you study, do they answer I study. Did he study? He studied. Will he study? He will study. If I ask them, didn't you study, and they say, I don't study, obviously they got the tense wrong. So then I'll ask them, didn't you read? And they would, if they say, I don't read, obviously no, they're not making the connect between the tenses, and you can point that out to them and drill them more until they become a bit comfortable with how to make the questions and the sentences. To practice the question-making skill, you can give them a sentence and they have to transfer it into a question. So you would say, I will go, and they would have to say, will I go? I didn't study, didn't I study? I read, do you read? So it's basically you're going back and forth just to getting them familiarized with how the question and answer process is made in English. My experience in this process is that generally in the first hour of studying any of our patterns, there'll be a lot of stumbling, there'll be mistakes they make which are natural. But as long as they understand the basic format and how the patterns are made, and you get a sense that they are able to handle that, in the second, the third, the fourth hour from now, they'll be able to get much more comfortable with it, and it will almost become second nature. I've always felt that if the student makes a mistake, that you should correct the mistake and show them where they're making the mistake. When they go out in public, rarely do their peers or their parents or adults correct their mistakes. They sort of understand what they're saying, but they don't correct them. The student comes to you to get a bit of guidance and to assure them that what they're saying is right. So no matter what the mistake is, I always correct the mistakes. These are the beginning blocks of conversation. They cannot be skipped. We have to help the students to understand the methodology, and this is the simple snapshot that they can use to get a handle on how the question and sentences are made.